Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hi everyone. What we're wanting to talk about today, in fact, Molly, love your talk because we're really going to, I suppose, pick up on a few of the themes from there today, in that kind of detailed stories of people and real lived experience, and how that real lived experience can provide really great insight around products. And then from the other side, that's the kind of bottom up, the deep story, empathy, aware, genuine people with range of messy, normal human needs. And then the top down is that kind of, how does that fit within a perspective of the overall population or the customer group or the employee group that the particular question you're asking about is coming from, so that you can prioritise decisions. Essentially, for those that don't know Open, our job is speed bump removal. So it's really identifying and removing the hurdles or frictions between customers and products or service providers, so that both sides can achieve to the greatest of their ambitions. So this is really about helping people on either side understand, be aware, and make the best decisions so that they get the outcomes they're after. The real stories and the real numbers, this is the kind of combination of the two that we think is much more powerful than just one or the other. That's what we really talk about today, in helping make better decisions, particularly when you're thinking about digital, as we're talking about with GAD here. Everything is always time constrained and budget constrained. So what's the next best decision you can make in order to make the product really inclusive and usable for everyone? So we'll start with the story.
Okay. Can you guys hear me? Is this working as well? Okay. Yes? Good? Good. So let me share with you Jane's story. Jane is someone that we work with closely. She's on our research panel that helps deliver insight to different clients. And she's a very independent professional woman. She has multiple sclerosis. So during a particularly bad spell, she was essentially confined to her bed for about a week. And she would have these spells in kind of relapses. At that time, she needed to get groceries. So she had two strategies for this. The first was to rely on family and friends to choose groceries for her, buy them, bring them to her. And the other strategy was to either, if she was well enough, to go into a Sainsbury's, for example, or to go on their website. Now, I'm not saying that was Sainsbury's in particular, but in any case, this time it didn't work for her. So she was, as I say, not able to do either of those strategies. And she didn't really want to rely on the family members because, among other reasons, she couldn't pick the stuff that she wanted. So instead, she decided to try out an app that delivered the groceries to her. The key point here is that the app was inclusively designed enough that she had a very good experience from that. I remember her telling me that she was particularly impressed that the person who brought the groceries, so she was able to pick out her own groceries and so on, and then they would even bring them to her kitchen counter and put them there nicely for her. So that kind of level of accessibility and inclusion built in made her a very strong brand advocate, and to this day, she still advocates for that service, which is very much what we're talking about here. So in her own words, she says, being able to use my phone to order my groceries when I was bedbound was a great service. I could choose what I wanted, and I didn't have to disturb family and friends. I'm a fan. Features that I found so accessible when I was ill have led me to recommending this service to other people in a range of different situations. So if you can accommodate the access needs of a wide variety of your population, you're actually creating strong brand ambassadors for your brand.
So this is one deep story of one person in one moment in their life when they were having, ongoing relapses. How relevant that one story in terms of the overall customer base? And this is where kind of understanding, this was particularly related to MS. MS impacts about 100,000 people in the UK. But MS is only one reason that people will have these particular access needs. And in fact, Molly was talking about before, some of the other reasons for access needs are not to do with long-term conditions, but could be temporary needs or situational needs as well. But if we just look at long-term needs, we've done quite a lot of work on the kind of UK-wide statistics, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But there were 3 needs that Jane had at this particular point in time. She had mobility, dexterity needs, and energy needs as well. So in terms of mobility, this is one of the biggest need groups in the UK. So from the one of the major resources we use, the FRS Family Resources Survey statistics, 19% of people in the UK have a mobility and impairment at any one point in time. So a significant limitation that is going to impact them for, at that moment in time for a while. Of that, 15% of them are defined as disabled. This isn't the social model of disability. This is 12 months or more, so it's actually a durational definition in the way that this particular question's asked. So this is about, that long-termness. 10.4 million is a huge population. That is equivalent to London, Birmingham and Manchester all put together. Who's not thinking about this group? And this is just the people that are impaired permanently at that point in time. Secondly is dexterity. For dexterity, it's 10% of the population have a dexterity need at one point in time. So that's about 5.7 million people. Just to give you a kind of what does this mean? That's equivalent to all the households in the UK subscribe to Netflix. And just think about all the conversations around House of Cards these days. And thirdly, the stamina and breathing. This is another really large one. 16% of people in the UK, this is the second largest to mobility, or 8.6 million people have stamina and breathing issues. And when you're thinking about going and doing shopping, bringing shopping back, putting it away, this is a really significant impairment that's going to impact that. And this is where some of the service differences, like putting the groceries on the counter rather than leaving them at the front door, made a massive difference at that critical moment in time for Jane. Lastly, this story is about multiple impairments. Now, we had Molly talk to us already, who's got multiple impairments because she's both deaf and blind, with Usher syndrome, or sight impaired and hearing impaired. This is very common. Multiple sclerosis is a multiple condition. Many conditions have multiple impacts. Ageing is often, comes with multiple impairments as people age. In fact, only 34% of the population that defines themselves as impaired says that they've only got one impairment. And over 40% have 3 or more impairments. This is really, really interesting when you're thinking about solving for impairment groups. And again, just referring to Molly's presentation, she had those 4 nice, neat buckets. So if you solve for one bucket, but you put the problem into the next one, and you haven't thought about how those correlate and how many people might have those multiple things going on at the same time, you're not solving for whole people and whole needs. So whole people are messy. Whole people come with all sorts of different needs in all sorts of different mixes at all sorts of different times. And this is a really kind of strong, the graphic here for people that can't see it, is basically the 100% is the whole purple area. The people with one impairment is 40%, 34%. 2 impairments is 23% additional that have, say they've got 2 impairments, and 3 and up is the rest of the 40% going right through to 9, which is a very small percentage. So this is an image really talking about that building empathy from a people level, the human side, and then taking the kind of scientific or mathematical element to it. It's kind of humanities and science coming together to create a stronger story for an organisation. And that individual experience and then put into perspective across either national or organisational broader numbers to understand the impact. So this particular image is an image of a festival, actually. I think this festival was in Germany, and it's taken from a drone shot. So there's just lots and lots of people, and you can see the patterns of where people are sitting and around the various features. But what we've done is we've brought out a few of these individuals more deeply. One of them is a young man who's wearing glasses, an assistive tech in itself. But maybe on the, we might have done this research, so we know this person has Asperger's and therefore has cognitive diversity. One's an older gentleman who's smiling with a purple hat. And his being older might have 3 or 4 minor impairments, none of which he self-identifies as disabled, but all might be equivalent to someone who's in their 20s who would consider themselves as disabled. This gentleman has a hearing aid, so obviously has a hearing need. There's a family down here with a young child who's got Down syndrome. There's an older lady who's a wheelchair user. There's a gentleman here who's just getting his eye bandaged, so obviously has a temporary need and for now will have a sight impairment. And there's a young lady with no specific need but might have, we might know has fluctuating physical or mental health conditions. Over to Tom.
So what you saw there was the sort of the mesh of larger scale approach, quantitative, and the insight that's captured on a more intimate basis with qualitative research, which is what we're talking about today. So over to the qualitative side, and I'll have a little bit more of a deeper dive into sort of the qualitative research that we do. Really, this is the premise, right? This is what we've been talking about today. Customers know best. I know my own particular situation and needs better than probably you do. That's natural. So this is kind of exemplified through this little cartoon here where this cartoon takes place in my native Canada, by the way, so there's a lot of snow. And the guy is shoveling the snow off the steps, and the young boy who wants to get into the school is saying, well, can you please shovel the ramp as well? And the adult says, well, it's not only just about you. There's all these other kids that want to go up. And then the boy quite rightly points out, well, if you actually shoveled the ramp, we could all go up. And it's that kind of insight that people who have, for the most part, been dealing with and designing around different access needs bring to the table when they share their insight with designers and developers. Okay, so we know that we've got to ask the questions, but despite our best efforts, are we asking enough? Are we asking people with impairments enough times? This is actually a quote from Ed, who is our panel lead for hearing impaired, and Ed's sitting right over there. So he told me, he said, I don't know what it is, but it seems deaf people often fall through the net when it comes to accessibility. Why don't companies just ask us more? Are you asking enough? Okay, fine. So how can we generate personal stories and insight? There are many different ways that you can ask. Okay, and this graphic here, I'm not going to go in depth into it, but it just shows some of the many ways that we can gather insight from our customers, and a wide range of customers for that matter. So there's probably quite a lot of user researchers. I don't remember what Alistair's stat was on that one, but I think I'm probably speaking to the converted here to a certain extent. So we've got on this side the quantitative approaches, and on the other axis qualitative approaches, so fewer participants. Some people like to say under 30 is a good sort of benchmark for qualitative research, quantitative being over 30, and in many cases quite a lot more than that. And then there's also attitudinal and behavioral insights, and that might be less familiar terms to you, but it's very simply, attitudinal is what people say, and behavioral is what people do. So there are different ways to gather insights from observing or listening to what people do, as for example when they use a website, or getting their opinions on what they think they will do or what they would rather do in what they say. Knowing how to ask and when to ask is crucial. right? So here in this cartoon, which is taken from one of my favorite books, Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug, great book. You know, the user researcher is kind of, he gets this is back in the days of answering machines, very ancient times, and the person says, you know, on the other, the client says, we're launching this product in 2 weeks. We want to do some focus groups. Oh man, okay, so the user researcher is like, wow, focus groups? That is an attitudinal-based research method. That's where people tell you their hopes and dreams and what they think about things, but it's not really the best method to use when you're 2 weeks from going live. Probably usability testing is a good idea, and even then it should have been done probably 6 months or a year before that. In any case, so knowing when to ask the questions. So, you know, when can we do this reality check with users, right? And I want to actually, this is not the explicit point of this slide, but implicitly is a cost issue, right? So, well, when does it make sense? When is it for our organization? When can we do this insight in a way that's cost effective for us? You know, so we have here the different stages of the design process: ideation, paper prototype, working prototype, beta, and live. Kind of a simplistic view of it, but there you have it. So, when is the best time to do a reality check? Anyone know? You probably know what I'm going to say. All of them, right? There are ways, even 1 or 2 people can give you insight that's outside of your own self. So, you know, there are lightweight approaches in every one of these stages to gathering some qualitative insight. And what we'll talk about in a second is how that's strengthened by combining it with the quantitative side. And this slide makes a similar point, really, which is that get the user insights early because it's more cost effective that way. So you can spend anywhere from 2% to 100% of your budget retroactively fitting in accessibility because it wasn't done early enough in the plan. The 2% figure is a lot better, and that's what you get when you start earlier in the project. So as early as possible, there are all sorts of great ways. Email surveys, phone surveys, very lightweight kind of research that you can do with disabled people, get their views. Even one person who is not yourself, but who has a particular access need, can shed a lot of light on you know, what you're actually designing. So I just want to close off this part of the presentation with just a few case studies from about the past year that we've done in our organization. We help deliver research for different clients, and we have a panel of disabled, older people and people with various access needs that help us deliver that research. So these case studies cover paper prototype stage, component testing, prototype stage, and beta and live stages. So if we look at our first case study here, what we tested was a prototype iOS app that presents stock market graphs in sound form, sonification, so that blind traders can understand patterns and trends in the data. So how we tested this, we described the interface. This was not a built app. It was, we described it. We actually sent, it was a very lightweight approach. It was a survey, as you can see. We described it. We also talked about questions of accessibility, usability, and the general concept behind the app. Would you use this? Would you want to use this, right? We had a niggling suspicion that, sure, blind people would want to be traders. Why not? And in fact, as I'll show you in the next slide, that was true. That is true. You know, blind people, like anyone else, want to have a view on their finances. And lo and behold, this is what our research found. We also then asked them to download a similar app that was from Apple's App Store, but had much, much less functionality. But it crucially showcased that sonification element and said, what do you think of this? You know, now that you've used it. So here was just a snippet of the responses that we got. Literally, this survey took about 3 days. I think this is a fabulous idea. I can see it in my head. And this actually reinforces that blind people, even those who are blind from birth, you don't need to see in order to have spatial concept right? So there's, I'm not going to get too academic, but there's a lot of literature out there which is pretty cool in the cognitive science arena that talks about spatial cortex and how through sound, so through some other alternative means, we can develop a sense of space and shapes within that space, even if we can't see, even if we were born blind. So sure enough, we had our blind panel members testing out this app, and they said that they could see the shape. Wow, like, you know, the trends in the data, in the financial data, were coming alive for them, which is pretty cool. This next user said, I was skeptical at first. Personally, I've never invested directly in the stock market, but I could see that this would be a useful way to help spot trends in stock market variations. So 10 to 20 users basically helped us realize that sonification in banking apps has legs. It's an interesting concept.
I'm just going to give two little additions to this one. One is that actually became a product, so that particular client then decided to go live with that product, and it is now a live product. And secondly, just in that extended market, the thing about sound is some people find patterns in sound more easily than they find patterns in sight. So actually people who are not blind or even visually impaired at all can find patterns through sound more effectively. In stock trading, obviously patterns are incredibly important. This is something that has just increased the usability of this particular product very significantly.
Yeah, and so the only thing I'll add to that is that the app that we eventually helped create actually received a commendation from the Design for All Foundation and is up for an award, so that's really cool. Okay, I've got to burn through these a little faster. Case study number 2 is components testing. Again, a survey, very simple, lightweight method. We just tested basically how blind people use the back button, what their preferred gesture was on mobile. And also we asked older and people who learn differently a question about home buttons. So basically, should you include a home menu item in your nav, in your main nav, or is the logo enough? So yeah, we created a data set and mapped it out, and we found, I mean, the short answer is that swiping left was the preferred gesture, and yes, you should include a home in your main nav, because not everyone recognizes that that logo in the top left is also a home button. Case study number 3. Now this was a really interesting project we did last summer, which was a lot of fun to do. This was in context usability testing. So what we tested was real-time assistance functionality using an iPhone app for rail journeys in England. So our panel members took the rail journeys with the app and tested not only the accessibility of the app, but also the whole customer experience. So the connected user journey, which is also, you know, were the staff there at the next station to receive them? Did they show up at the right place on the train, in the right car, and so on? We also did interviews with station staff, which were revealing as well. So one of our blind panel members said the app feels personal and friendly. That was actually what she really honed in on, was that psychological effect of the personal and friendly nature of this of messaging, which I'll get to in a second. But I wasn't expecting to feel that closeness to the staff, because it's not needed strictly for the journey, but actually emotionally it is needed. So she was used to showing up at transport hubs with all these people going, you know, in every which way, being blind and waiting for assistance, but not knowing when that assistance would come, not knowing who's coming. And so through the app, she could actually get a message that says, you know, Steve is going to come and meet you in 20 minutes. So even though she had to wait, she knew how long she was waiting, and it made a big impact on her. Finally, assistant staff said, yeah, they really like the app too, because it really made their job easier. And what's more, it would be great if every one of them had the app on their phone. So they actually provided a suggestion for improving the user experience from their perspective. So this is just a small graphic that shows that messaging aspect of the app was by far the most popular one. And again, this qualitative research we did was not with a huge number of users. Finally, the usability test. I'm sure most people in the room are familiar with this. This is the traditional sort of in-lab usability test. What we tend to do a lot of are kind of 1 or 2 day engagements, and we will often choose broadly rather than deeply. So we'll go across impairment categories. So we might have 6 different impairment types, including just older or temporary fluctuating conditions within a single day. So in this case, we tested the European and UK websites of an electronic retailer, and we discovered a whole host of issues. I should say, so these are quotes are of some of the issues that were discovered, but actually, and the client was behind the glass in the lab, they found the usability testing enlightening because in addition to a whole boatload of accessibility considerations and usability considerations, they actually found out that actually their brand was highly regarded and respected. So there was actually a positive outcome to it, and the brand was generally liked. But at the same time, there were some of these issues were foregrounded. So it's good that there are pictures and words as a combination. Generally speaking, is a good thing for a wide variety of users. But it feels too much like a promotions feed. We actually had, well, Molly was talking about pop-up windows and things like that, and we had an entire section of the website flash up in a huge promotions for one of our vision-impaired users who had it zoomed in at like 300% and completely threw him off. He didn't know what was going on. Fonts are too small, poor contrast. What does the hand icon mean? Right? So not everyone is as tech savvy or kind of grasps the metaphors in the same way. This was an older gentleman who also had MS. I don't like the link find out more, link find out more, link find out more. Obviously a screen reader user. We talked about this in the previous presentation as well. And then a big fail was that there was a trap. So the screen reader user could not get past the cookie message. So all of these things, this again brings to mind my favorite author, Steve Krug, who says that within a half hour of usability testing, you can usually find more issues than you can fix in a month. And that's a good thing, actually. So within a very short period of time, with a small number of users, boy, can you get a lot of great insight that can help ultimately make your product better. So now I'll turn it over to Christine, and we'll talk about the other half of it.
Thanks, Tom. So essentially, if that's the kind of deep people experience, that putting it into context is really about these 3 things. Getting that data-driven intelligence, so getting both insight but also the broader data, to help make better decisions that'll give better outcomes. And that goes back to that, everything is a priority. If everything's a priority, there is no priority. So you've got to work out how do you actually do the prioritisation. And that's where the quant can really come in and help. From a quantitative basis, it's really about what the question is. And the best engagements we have tend to be when the client's really clear about the question. Because if they're really clear about what they're trying to ask, we can be really helpful in what the best tool is to answer that. And there's all sorts of tools we can use, from product level insight, organisational level maturity, leading practice reviews of just what's the leading industry practice at the moment, marketing or industry volumes and value of various segments, customer segment specific volumes and value, or actually bringing that together, and we do some quite sophisticated return on investment modelling in inclusion. So I love this quote. Tom and I both love quotes, as you'll see. The thing about insight is quite often it's not about learning something, it's about removing some of the myths that you might be holding on to you're not even aware you have. So this is a Mark Twain quote. It's not what you don't know that gets you in trouble, it's what you know that just ain't so. Another one, just because I've got to love quotes, given that this is the quant side, in God we trust, but all others bring data. This is the same guy that said it's not necessary to change because survival's not mandatory. And I think that's a really good one to throw into this here, because if you think about, and we're about to go into the quant side, an ageing population, increasing impairments, increasing customer expectations of things being supportive of their needs. People are far less accepting of poor customer experience, particularly poor digital experience now. You don't need to change because it's not mandatory that everyone survives. So So some of the things that quantitative research can give you and you can specifically look at, really, how many people in the user base that you're looking at, whether that's an employee user base, the kind of demographics that you target for employees coming into your organisation, or whether it's a customer user base and the kind of targeted audiences you have for your products and services. What sort of numbers and values have you got against categories and severities of various impairments? 3 people who have exactly the conversation we had before with Molly and Bryn, people with ostensibly the same impairment, potentially even ostensibly at the same level of impairment, might have completely different adaptation approaches, and that means the way that the product works for them or doesn't work for them is completely different. So adaptation approaches are really important. And comorbidities. Obviously, if you're solving the problem by throwing to another sense or another need, but you haven't solved for that need properly, that could just be creating another problem elsewhere. Then the value of the group, so overall really understanding value, and we've done a lot of work, which I'll talk to in a moment, but around value. Digital usage and device preference is really important when you're thinking about where you prioritise which, and if people have if you know that certain communities are using one device more heavily than another, you might prioritise your iOS over your Android or your Android over your iOS. And then age, gender, other demographics, not all of these are spectrums of people with the spectrums of needs and other attributes to them. And then aligning that to target markets. How we've done it is we've really got to grips with what primary resources, survey resources, are out there in the UK today. These are more than happy to share these with people because these are 4 of them that you can use. Actually, you can't use Understanding Society unless you're a data science agency. So in fact, even we can't. We've done this with a data science partner that's drawn that data for us and then done the early stage analysis. But FRS, so the Family Resources Survey, Life Opportunities and Labour Force Survey are available to everyone. You can draw down the data, you can analyse it, you can scrub it, use it, manipulate it as you wish. So these are fabulous resources. Those 3 are all ONS. Unfortunately, the Life Opportunity Survey is finished. The last run was 2014. It was longitudinal, which made it absolutely fabulous. So it was 2009 to 2014 with 3 tranches, but it hasn't been updated since, and there's not a plan to do so. The LFS, the Labour Force Survey and Family Resources Survey is done on a regular basis. So the data that I'm sharing with you today was the most recent Family Resources Survey. Understanding Society, point of note, that is probably the richest, most interesting, most fabulous resource that you can use. It does require someone to have access to it, so you do need to actually apply for access and say what you're going to use it for, and you get given access for certain things. The thing that's really fabulous about it is it's longitudinal, which means that they follow the same people through over time, and it's they're now up to wave 7 and it's 40,000 households. So when we're thinking about nationally representative, it really is a very strongly representative base. Sorry, this is me being a bit geeky, so anyone's welcome to come and talk to me about this after if you're interested in using these. So just what these have told us. Firstly, it's a small market. These are some of the myths that we hear and some of that unknowing that we think is useful to do. No, it's not. Most people probably in this room are aware of the 1 in 5 statistic that gets thrown out there, which is the number of people with disabilities. It's 21%, was the latest FRS. Actually, that's people with a disability, so over 12 months with a significant impairment. 34%, so 1 in 3 people, at the point of time of the survey had that impairment. So, obviously that impacts people's adaptation, but if you're thinking about people's needs at any point in time, it's 1 in 3. And that's before we've added situational or temporary. Yes, 24% class as disabled, so 1 in 4, which was up from the 1 in 5 the year before, the generation before, which is why that still gets quoted. We also do quite a lot of work in the sub-impairment category, so really getting to grips with each of the impairments. So how many are impaired versus disabled? So that's the duration in this particular definition. The gender balance, males and females. In mobility, it's weighted to females, 55%, mainly because of age differences. So because women live longer and mobility is highly correlated with age. How many have an impairment versus disability, and then working age versus over 65. We do a whole lot of different things. We also do things like we do income tables for these, we do digital usage, we can split this data in as many ways as the data provides us from the other things that they capture. The second myth is it's not such a valuable segment. Again, hopefully this community is aware. I'm going to update yet again numbers. People tend to batter around the 212 billion. I don't know if anyone's heard the purple pound at 212 billion. When it was first released, the first FRS work that was done around the purple pound, that was the number that was put out in the market at the time. I still hear it used today. As at last year, so even this one's out of date now, but as at last year, so the latest stats that we have available, it's 265 billion pounds. It's not a very small number. That's 15% of the UK's discretionary income. So why do people not really get that it's a valuable segment? And I still hear this when we're talking to clients. It's like, yes, there's probably a lot of people, but I'm not sure that they really have enough money. They're probably not our clients. I think there's three reasons for this, and these are the three I'm going to... This is just the Christine says, as opposed to that there's any science behind this. But the Christine says is, it's complicated, it's messy, and therefore it's a bit difficult to get your head around, and therefore people kind of just go, maybe it's not as big as people say it is. The second one is actually, a very small proportion, or a smaller proportion of people with impairments have visible impairments. So it's not so visible to people, and we've had a client who's literally looked us in the eye and said, but I don't know, I mean, I get that these are right because these seem to be statistically correct, and I know you've done all the work, but I don't know anyone with an impairment and I don't see them. So is that really the case? And that's where this is really important, that actually recognising that a lot of people with impairments, you won't know. And the third one is in terms of value. This is actually my uncle sitting on a pink flamingo in the pool. That the older generation have the bulk of the wealth. The thing about baby boomers, and in fact he's an Australian, as you might hear I am, but in the UK, in Australia, in many of the Western countries, that had their main wealth creation time through the 60s, 70s and 80s have the bulk of the asset wealth and discretionary income wealth. They also have very high expectations of service. So if you're not looking after them, they will move on, and they are the ones that are holding that discretionary income and asset base at the moment. And that's quite different from the last generation of old or the generation before. This is how we use national averages. This is just a little tool that I've built that I can put any number in the top of a population. So when we're going to talk to a client, I quite often look up what's their client base or what's their employee pool, stick that number in the top and say, if you were nationally representative, not everyone is, if you were, this is the proportion of people that you would have impaired or disabled with the various impairments. And this is the value of household income of those people. That's really quite powerful because they're going, oh, some quite large numbers in there. Maybe I should think about that. It also helps think about priorities. The third one, that they're not really my target customers and staff. We particularly got this when we were working with a luxury brand, and one of the things we did is we looked at some of their the people that are their brand ambassadors out there in the market, and we found that a third of their brand ambassadors actually had stated or hidden impairments, that they've put out in the market. And they went, oh, we didn't even know that. This was their brand ambassadors out in the market. So the age wealth bias I've already talked about, particularly the current baby boomer generation coming through, or that have come through and are coming through behind there again. That designing for us all, I was talking to NASA from Microlink last week out at NADEX, and we're really talking about the assistive technology versus efficiency tools. And I know, Microsoft is very much into considering how do we make this just mainstream technology. And that's that if you design for us all, and how do we make sure that everybody's aware that it's available and it's efficient. And lastly, that in employment, just one statistic on that to take away from today, that 1 in 5 employees have an impairment. We know that from the labour force statistics. Only 3 to 5% will share that with their employees. So we know there's a very big gap there that most employees will hold. So this is the last one. Essentially, bringing this all together, get insight, and there's 2 ways to do that. Ask people, ask the communities you're wanting to engage with, ask people for their insight, even if it's guerrilla testing rather than full. It's always better to do a little than none at all, and to do it more regularly than to do it thinking you'll do one big lump. And then understand that from the quantitative side as well. Use that to prioritise and make better decisions, make the changes, and then really importantly, measure the impact out of the changes. And we've done quite a lot of work to help organisations do that as well. We didn't cover that off today. So top down and bottom up, we believe that that can make a much better experience. Over to questions.